Hey guys, tonight we are going to get a little weird. We're stepping into a world where the lines between medicine, magic, spirituality, and recreation are not just blurry, they don't exist at all. We're exploring the pharmacopoeia of the Middle Ages, from the village alehouse to the apothecary's shadowy shop. Imagine trying to cure a headache, ease your weary bones, or even just escape the sheer, grinding misery of daily life. But your only options come from a garden patch that contains both your lunch and a one-way ticket to a terrifying conversation with a goat. With no chemical analysis or standardized doses, getting high was the ultimate gamble. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. A simple miscalculation could land you in a ditch, a dungeon, or a grave. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always fun to see where everyone is tuning in from, so feel free to post your city and what time it is for you in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world smells of dust, damp wool, and dried herbs. You are an apprentice, and your home, your school, and your prison is this apothecary shop. It's a single, low-ceilinged room, dark even at midday. The air is thick with 1,000 competing scents, the sweet, cloying perfume of dried lavender hanging from the rafters, the sharp tang of vinegar, the earthy smell of valerian root, and a faint, metallic scent you can't quite place. Sunbeams, heavy with dust motes, slice through the gloom from a single, grimy window, illuminating shelves crammed with clay pots, wooden boxes, and glass jars holding things you try not to think about too hard. You stand at a heavy wooden table, its surface stained and scarred by centuries of chopping, grinding, and brewing. Your task today is simple: sorting. On your left, a pile of dried poppy heads, their little crowns rattling with the promise of 1,000 tiny seeds. On your right, a basket of dark, crinkly leaves that your master calls henbane. Your job is to separate the viable seeds and leaves from the chaff and mold. Your master, a gaunt man named Alaric, whose hands are permanently stained with gentian and bile, watches you with a hawk's eye. He taught you the first, most important rule of this trade: everything in this room can heal, and everything in this room can kill. The only difference is the dose. This is the central truth of your existence. A customer comes in, bend over with a hacking cough. Alaric will grind up some lungwort, a plant whose spotted leaves, he explains, look like a diseased lump. This is the doctrine of signatures, a core principle of your craft, the belief that God marked plants with a sign to indicate their use. It's a well-established medical fact for you, as certain as the sun rising. So walnuts, which look like tiny brains, are for ailments of the head. Eyebright, with its delicate, eye-like flower, is for the vision. It's a beautifully simple, if scientifically questionable, system. But then, another customer arrives, a wealthy merchant's wife, her face pale with grief. Her husband is dead, and she cannot sleep. For her, Alaric will not reach for the lungwort. He'll go to a locked chest, and with a tiny silver spoon, he will measure out a fine, brownish powder into a twist of wax paper. The price he charges is astronomical. Later, you ask him what it was. "Mamma mia," he says, without looking up from his ledger. He explains that it's the ground-up remains of ancient Egyptian pharaohs, filled with the mystic power of the Old Kingdom, a cure for everything from insomnia to plague. This is a quirky, but very real, part of your world's medicine. You're essentially selling powdered pharaohs as a sleeping aid. The original celebrity-endorsed wonder drug. You look at the shelves behind him. You see jars labeled mandragora, belladonna, aconite. These aren't for coughs or sadness. These are the deep secrets. These are the plants that can make a man forget his own name, see monsters in the shadows, or feel his soul peel away from his skin. There are no child-proof caps here. The only thing stopping a catastrophe is your master's knowledge and your own terrified obedience. Historians still argue whether apothecaries like Alaric were true believers in the full spectrum of their craft, from the magical signatures to the divine power of mummies, or if they were shrewd pragmatists. Perhaps they were some of the world's first clinical psychologists, understanding that ritual, mystery, and a customer's belief were just as potent as any active ingredient. Did Alaric really think the ground-up king was doing the work, or did he know that the sheer cost and exoticism of the remedy would convince the wealthy widow she simply had to feel better? The line between pharmacist and showman is as thin as a razor's edge. Your master catches you staring at the locked chest. "Curiosity is a good servant, but a poor master," he mutters, his voice dry as old parchment. "Know the difference between a medicine and a poison." He holds up a single, dark henbane seed, no bigger than a grain of sand. "This," he says, "can calm a fevered mind. It can soothe the aches of old age. It can give visions." He pauses, letting the silence hang in the dusty air. "And 10 of them can make a man's heart forget how to beat. Now get back to work. And be careful. One stray seed in the wrong mixture, and you'll be answering to God for it, not me." You lower your gaze back to the pile of leaves and seeds. Your fingers feel clumsy, your breath shallow. You are surrounded by power. The power to ease pain, to bring sleep, to end life, and you suspect, to unlock doors in the mind that are meant to stay closed. This shop is the gateway, and you are its apprentice keeper, learning the dangerous alchemy of altered states, one carefully sorted seed at a time. The weight of your master's words still sits heavy on you as he finally waves a dismissive, stained hand. "Go. Eat. But be back before the second bell. The nightshade needs grinding." You don't need telling twice. You bow your head and slip out of the shop, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind you. The cool evening air is a relief, washing away the claustrophobic herbal intensity of the room. But the scent lingers in your clothes, in your hair. You feel like a walking ghost of the apothecary, marked by its strange perfumes. You need to wash the feeling away, and there's only one place in this grimy town to do that. You turn down the main thoroughfare, past the butcher shop, now shuttered, its entryway smelling faintly of iron and sawdust, past the weaver's cottage where the clack of the loom has finally gone silent. Your destination is just ahead, spilling a slice of warm, yellow light into the growing twilight, the alehouse. It's not a grand establishment. It has no sign, just a leafy branch, an ale steak, hung over the door to announce that a new batch has been brewed and is ready for sale. You push open the door and a wall of sound and heat hits you. After the tomb-like quiet of the apothecary, the alehouse is a roaring inferno of life. The air is thick with wood smoke from the central fire pit, the smell of sweat, wet wool, and the sweet, bready aroma of spilled ale. It's packed. Farmers, laborers, a couple of off-duty town guards, all crammed onto rough-hewn benches, shouting over each other. This isn't a place for quiet contemplation, it's a pressure valve for the entire village. You squeeze onto the end of a bench, nodding to a familiar face, a stonemason's apprentice whose hands are even more callous than yours. The proprietress, a formidable woman named Ira with arms as thick as your legs, spots you. She is the alewife, and here's a well-known historical fact. In much of medieval Europe, brewing was women's work. It was a domestic chore that evolved into a commercial enterprise run from the home. Ira is a master of her craft. She moves through the chaos with a jug in each hand, her authority absolute. There are no bar brawls on Ira's watch that she doesn't personally finish. She plunks a clay mug in front of you without a word and fills it from her jug. You slide 2 of your precious copper coins across the sticky table. The ale is nothing like the crisp, clear beers of the future. It's thick, murky, and opaque, with bits of grain and yeast still floating in it. It's served at room temperature, which is to say, slightly chilled by the evening air. It's less a beverage and more of a meal you could almost chew. You've just purchased the most common, most widespread, and most socially acceptable high of the medieval world. You take a long pull. The taste is strong, yeasty, and slightly sweet. Immediately, a gentle warmth blooms in your belly and begins to creep through your limbs. The cold you felt in your bones from the damp shop floor begins to recede. This is the magic of ale. It's not the sharp, reality-bending magic of the herbs on Alaric's shelves. It's a slow, dull, comforting magic. It's a blanket, not a lightning bolt. This drink is, in many ways, safer than water. The local river, which serves as both the town's water source and its sewer, is a gamble every time you dip a cup in it. Drinking the water is often just a faster way to meet your maker. But the process of brewing, boiling the water and adding the alcohol, kills the microscopic fiends. This makes ale a staple of the diet, a source of calories and hydration often referred to as liquid bread. You're not just getting intoxicated, you're getting your daily dose of B vitamins. Health and hedonism in one convenient, muddy package. After the second mug, the edges of the room begin to soften. The shouting of the men no longer feels abrasive, but part of a warm, communal hum. The flickering tallow candles cast a gentler glow. The anxieties of the day, the fear of mixing the wrong dose, the weight of your master's expectations, begin to feel distant and less important. You find yourself talking with the stonemason's apprentice, complaining about your masters, boasting about girls you've never spoken to, laughing at a joke you only half heard. Historians still argue whether the primary function of the alehouse was as a social lubricant and escape, or if it was a critical piece of the community's infrastructure. Was this just a place to get drunk, or was it the unofficial town hall, the news station, the marketplace for labor, and the forum for political dissent all rolled into one? Here, contracts were made with a handshake, news from passing travelers was exchanged, and public opinion was formed, one boisterous conversation at a time. For you, it's both. You came here to escape, but you're also learning who's hiring, which lord is raising taxes, and that the miller is cheating people again. Here's a quirky tidbit: the pointed hat, so often associated with witches, may have its origins with alehouse like Ira. To stand out in a crowded market, an alewife selling her wares would often wear a tall, distinctive hat. When brewing became a more male-dominated, commercial enterprise, and women brewing at home became objects of suspicion, the image of a woman with a tall hat, a cauldron, her brew kettle, and a cat, to keep mice from the grain, became sinister. Your friendly neighborhood brewer becomes the prototype for a fairy tale monster. The warmth in your belly is now a pleasant, heavy buzz in your head. The world is simple and good. This is the high of the common man. It doesn't promise visions of heaven or hell. It just makes the earth a slightly more bearable place to be for a few hours. It's a temporary truce with the harshness of life. But as you drain your last mug, you know this gentle escape has its limits. Tomorrow, the poppy heads are waiting, promising a peace far deeper and more perilous than anything Ira's ale could ever offer. The ale buzz has faded by the time you stumble back to the shop, leaving behind a dull ache in your head and the taste of stale yeast in your mouth. Alaric is nowhere to be seen, likely in his small chamber behind the shop, lost in one of his heavy, leather-bound books. The single candle he left burning for you throws long, dancing shadows on the walls, making the hanging bundles of herbs look like sleeping bats. The nightshade he mentioned is waiting for you, a pile of dark leaves in a stone mortar. But your task for tonight is not with the plant of madness, but with the plant of peace. You move to the back of the shop, to the drying racks where the poppy heads you sorted earlier are laid out in neat rows. They are beautiful in a severe, architectural way, pale globes on stiff, slender stems, each wearing its little kingly crown. They look inert, harmless. But you know better. You've watched your master perform the harvest in his own small, high-walled garden, and you know the secret they hold. Let's step back in time a few weeks. You are in that hidden garden with Alaric. The sun is warm on your back. The air is alive with the hum of bees. It's a ride of green life, but one patch stands out. A bed of poppies, their petals a shocking, delicate white. They are at that perfect stage of ripeness, just after the petals have fallen, leaving the pale green seed pod, the capsule, exposed and swollen. Alaric hands you a small knife with a multi-bladed tip, like a tiny rake. "Watch," he says, his voice softer than usual, almost reverent. He shows you how to score the pod. Not too deep, or the precious sap will run down inside the plant. Not too shallow, or it won't bleed. It's a delicate art, a surgeon's incision on a vegetable patient. You make 3 or 4 shallow, vertical cuts on the surface of the green capsule. Almost immediately, a thick, milky white substance begins to ooze from the cuts, like tears. This is the poppy's blood. This is opium. You spend the rest of the afternoon in a strange, hypnotic rhythm, moving from plant to plant, carefully, gently scoring each pod. The milky sap smells faintly green and bitter. You leave it to weep. You will return the next day, after the sun and air have worked their magic. When you do, the white milk has transformed into a dark, sticky, brownish-black gum that has hardened on the skin of the pod. This is what you scrape off with a small, curved blade, collecting it into a clay pot. It is a painstaking, laborious process. It takes 100 poppies to yield a single, dark, tarry lump the size of your thumb. Now, back in the dark apothecary shop, you hold one of these dried, unscored poppy heads. You snap it from its stem. The seeds inside rattle, destined for a baker's loaf or to be pressed for the oil. But the real power is in the pod itself. Even dried, the husk contains residual alkaloids. Grinding these pods creates a weaker, but still effective, preparation for teas and poultices. But the real treasure is that dark, sticky gum you harvested. A historical fact: opium has been used for at least 6,000 years. The ancient Sumerians called it hul-gil, the joy plant. Its use as a painkiller and soporific was well documented by the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans, and that knowledge, though fragmented, survived into your medieval world. You take a tiny piece of the raw opium, no bigger than a grain of rice, and place it on your tongue as Alaric once instructed you to. Understand its nature. The taste is intensely bitter, acrid. It makes your tongue numb. Then, slowly, over the next half hour, a profound change begins. It's nothing like the boisterous, clumsy warmth of the ale. This is a quiet, creeping tide. First, the ache in your head from the ale simply vanishes. The soreness in your back from hunching over the sorting table dissolves. All the small, chronic discomforts of your physical existence are gently erased. The world outside the shop, with its noise and its mud and its endless labor, ceases to be a concern. Your thoughts, which usually race with anxieties and tedious chores, slow down, becoming smooth and orderly. A deep, profound sense of well-being settles over you. It is not happiness. It is not joy. It is something much deeper, peace. A complete and total absence of want, of pain, of fear. This is the poppy's promise. You understand now why the merchant's wife would pay a fortune for it. In a world defined by pain, the pain of childbirth, the pain of disease, the pain of back-breaking labor, the pain of grief, the promise of a few hours of painless peace is the promise of heaven on earth. Historians still argue whether the use of opium in the medieval period was widespread among the general populace or if it was restricted, due to its cost and the specialized knowledge required to harvest it, to the wealthy elite and the pharmacopoeia of apothecaries and monastic infirmaries. Was it a common household remedy, or a closely guarded secret of the medical profession? The evidence is scarce, as such remedies were often recorded in obscure texts or simply passed down through oral tradition. For every lord paying for a dose of laudanum, opium dissolved in wine, there might have been 100 peasants who knew which poppy to grow in their garden for a toothache, a practice that would leave no historical record. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. A preparation known as dwale was a popular anesthetic recipe in medieval England. Its main ingredients were often opium, henbane, and hemlock, mixed with wine. The recipe sounds like a cocktail designed by the Grim Reaper. While it certainly would have rendered a patient unconscious for surgery, the line between anesthetic depth and a permanent dirt nap was terrifyingly thin. It's a testament to how desperate people were to avoid the agony of the surgeon's knife. You sit there on the stool, the world muffled and distant. You feel a gentle, floating sensation, as if you are swaddled in warm cotton. You could sit here forever. You understand the danger now. It's not the dramatic, terrifying danger of nightshade. It's the danger of a perfect, seductive peace. The danger of forgetting that the world of pain is the world of the living. Why would anyone choose to return to it? The candle sputters, and the thought of grinding the nightshade seems like an impossible, Herculean effort. The poppy is whispering to you, telling you to just stay here, in the quiet, in the peace. Just for a little while longer. The poppy's serene tide eventually recedes. leaving you beached on the shores of reality with a dry mouth and a strange sense of loss. The piece feels like a borrowed cloak that has been reclaimed, leaving you shivering in the familiar rags of your own anxieties. Alaric's final command of the evening echoes in your head. The nightshade needs grinding. You sigh, the sound loud in the renewed silence of the shop, and push yourself off the stool. It's time to move from the plant of blissful quiet to the plants of chaos. You approach the stone mortar on the main workbench. Piled beside it is a basket of leaves and roots that you instinctively handle with more care than the poppies. These are not friendly plants. This is the stuff of whispered stories, of curses and madness. This is the infamous trio, the unholy trinity of the witch's garden, belladonna, henbane, and mandrake. While each is distinct, they are chemical cousins, all belonging to the nightshade family, Solanaceae. And they all produce a class of potent alkaloids, atropine, scopolamine, hyoscyamine, that will hijack your brain and take it for a terrifying joyride. First, you handle the belladonna. The name itself is a paradox. In Italian, it means beautiful lady. A well-known historical fact is that Renaissance women would use eye drops made from a dilution of the plant's essence. The atropine in it would block the nerve signals that constrict the pupils, causing them to dilate dramatically. The resulting wide-eyed, dark-pooled gaze was considered captivating and fashionable. You're essentially using a potent neurotoxin as a cosmetic. It's the medieval equivalent of getting Botox, but with a much higher chance of accidentally poisoning yourself into a coma. The plant's other name is far more honest, deadly nightshade. Its berries are shiny, black, and sweet, looking deceptively like wild cherries. A handful is enough to kill a grown man. The symptoms are classic anticholinergic poisoning, a mouth as dry as dust, a racing heart, blurred vision, and a feverish, flushed skin. But the real effects are on the mind. It induces a profound delirium, a state of utter confusion where hallucinations are indistinguishable from reality. You don't just see things that aren't there, you interact with them, have conversations with them, and inhabit a completely fabricated world. Next in the basket is henbane. Its leaves are hairy and sticky, and the whole plant has a foul, unpleasant odor. Its flowers are a sickly, veiny yellow-purple. Henbane, or Hyoscyamus niger, has been used as a medicine and poison since ancient Greece. Its effects are similar to belladonna's, but with a few signature twists. It was particularly known for inducing a sensation of flying or weightlessness. This specific property will become very important later when we talk about witches' ointments. Henbane also tends to be more sedating than belladonna, pulling its victim into a bizarre, waking dream state, a feature that made it a key ingredient in those risky surgical anesthetics like Dwale. Finally, at the bottom of the basket, wrapped in its own cloth like a holy relic, is the mandrake root. You don't even touch it. Alaric handles the mandrake himself. Of the three, it is the most steeped in folklore and fear. We'll get into the whole business of its blood-curdling scream later, but its chemistry is just as potent as its cousins. It contains the same powerful alkaloids, making it a powerful hallucinogen and anesthetic. You begin your work, taking the dry, crumbly henbane leaves and placing them in the heavy stone mortar. You pick up the pestle, and the rhythmic, percussive thump crunch begins to echo in the shop. With each motion, a fine, pungent dust puffs into the air. Alaric taught you to tie a damp cloth over your nose and mouth when doing this, a primitive but essential form of PPE. Even inhaling the dust from these plants can have effects. Here's a quirky tidbit of fringe history. Some scholars have proposed that the honeydew and milk of paradise in Samuel Taylor Coleridge's famous poem, Kubla Khan, which he claimed to have composed in an opium-induced dream, might have been influenced by more than just the poppy. The vivid, delirious, and fragmented nature of the imagery in the poem bears a striking resemblance to the hallucinatory states produced by the nightshade family. It's possible his opium was adulterated with henbane, or that he was taking multiple substances. Historians and toxicologists still argue whether medieval people truly understood the distinct properties of each of these three plants, or if they were used somewhat interchangeably as deliriants. Did an apothecary like Alaric know that belladonna was more likely to cause a frantic, high-energy delirium, while henbane might produce a more stuporous, dreamlike state. Or did he simply know them all as the strong ones, to be used with extreme caution when a patient needed to be knocked out of their senses for one reason or another? His knowledge is practical, not academic. He knows that a poultice of henbane can soothe a toothache, and that a belladonna plaster can calm a gut spasm, and that a full dose of either will make you babble to your ancestors. As you grind, you feel a familiar, unwelcome lightness in your head. A slight dryness in your mouth that isn't from thirst. The edges of your vision seem to swim slightly. Despite the damp cloth, the dust is working its way in. The shadows in the corner of the room seem to deepen and coalesce, and for a terrifying second, you think you see one of them move. You blink hard, shaking your head. It's just a trick of the candlelight, you tell yourself. Just the dust. But you know you're playing with fire. Tonight, you got a taste of the poppy's heaven. Now, as you grind the witch's herbs, you can feel the faint, unsettling whispers of the hell they can unleash. Your work is a constant balancing act on a knife's edge, with peace on one side and madness on the other. You are dreaming of a quiet field of poppies when a frantic pounding on the shop door jolts you awake. It's not the rhythmic, authoritative knock of the town watch, but a panicked, desperate drumming. You hear Alaric's shuffling footsteps, the grate of the bolt, and a flood of hushed, urgent voices. A few minutes later, your master appears in the doorway of your small sleeping nook, his face grim in the moonlight. "Get up," he says. "The woodcutter's boy. A tree fell wrong. He is already gathering supplies. Bring the sponge." Your blood runs cold. The sponge. Not a sponge. The sponge. It's a tool you have helped prepare but have never seen used. You retrieve it from a special, dried box. It's a simple sea sponge, stiff and brown, but it is saturated with the most potent cocktail your shop has to offer. You know the recipe by heart. It was steeped in a hot brew of opium, ground henbane leaves, mandrake root, and mulberry juice, then left to dry in the sun. Remember the poppy's peace and the nightshade's madness? This sponge is a concentrated, weaponized version of both. You follow Alaric through the deserted, moonlit streets. The only sound is the frantic chirping of crickets and your own hurried footsteps. You arrive at a small, wattle-and-daub house. The door is open. Inside, it's a scene from a nightmare. The room is crowded, hot, and smells of sweat and fear. The woodcutter's son, a boy no older than 16, lies on the family's only table, his face ashen and beaded with sweat. His leg is a ruin. A compound fracture, the bone jutting through the skin at a sickening angle, the whole limb already swollen and discolored. A large, bearded man you recognize as Thomas the barber surgeon is standing over the boy, calmly laying out a terrifying array of tools on a piece of cloth, saws, knives, and a heavy iron poker resting in the hearth's coals. This is a crucial historical fact. Thomas is not a physician. University-trained physicians looked at charts and prescribed remedies. Barber surgeons were the hands-on craftsmen of the medical world. They pulled teeth, led blood, and when necessary, they cut. His specialty is getting things off people. The boy is conscious, moaning, his eyes wide with terror. His family huddles in a corner, their faces a mask of grief, their prayers a low, desperate murmur. There will be no privacy for this ordeal. Alaric approaches the boy's father, speaking in a low, calm voice. Money is exchanged. Your master is being paid to provide the oblivion. Thomas is being paid for the butchery. Is it ready? Thomas grunts, not looking at you. Alaric nods and turns to you. The bowl. You hold out a small wooden bowl. Your master pours in some warm wine, then places the stiff, dry sponge into it. It softens and swells, releasing a thick, herbaceous, cloyingly sweet smell into the already thick air. This is the moment of truth. Alaric gently squeezes the excess wine from the sponge until it is just damp, then hands it to you. Your hands are trembling. Hold it to his nose and mouth. Alaric commands. Firmly. And do not breathe too deeply yourself. You approach the boy on the table. He looks at you, his eyes pleading. You can only give him a grim, hopefully reassuring nod before you press the damp, foul-smelling sponge over his face. He struggles for a moment, his body bucking. The smell is overwhelming. You try to hold your breath. The boy's struggles weaken, his moans turning into a gurgling sigh. His eyes don't close. They remain open, but they become glassy, unfocused. He stares up at the ceiling as if watching a pageant of invisible angels or demons. You've plunged him into the strange twilight of a full-blown delirium trip. Historians and medical historians still argue about the true efficacy of the soporific sponge. Was it a genuine anesthetic, capable of producing true unconsciousness and amnesia? Or did it simply induce a state of paralyzed delirium, where the patient was still aware, still felt the pain, but was trapped in a hallucinatory nightmare, unable to move or scream? The accounts are ambiguous. Some texts claim the patient felt nothing. Others describe them talking and thrashing, but without purpose. The truth is likely somewhere in the horrifying middle. With a curt nod from Alaric, Thomas the barber surgeon gets to work. There is no sanitation. Sterilization is a concept that won't be invented for another 600 years. For now, clean means he wiped the blade on his trousers. The next few minutes are a blur of brutal, efficient violence. The sound of the saw grating against bone is not something you will ever forget. It's a wet, rhythmic, awful sound that seems to go on for an eternity. Through it all, the boy on the table does not scream. He just stares, a thin line of drool trickling from the corner of his mouth, his fingers twitching. Then, the smell of burning flesh fills the room as Thomas takes the red-hot poker from the fire and cauterizes the stump. A cloud of acrid smoke billows up, and even the boy's father turns away, choking back a sob. It is a brutal, but life-saving, act to stop the bleeding and seal the wound from the bad air, believed to cause infection. The only post-op care available is a prayer and maybe a stiff drink of ale, assuming you still have the stomach for it. Your job is done. Alaric motions for you to remove the sponge. You pull it away, and the boy's glassy-eyed stare slowly fades back into pained, confused consciousness. He doesn't seem to know what just happened. He only knows the terrible, searing pain of the aftermath. Here's a quirky, and rather grim, tidbit. The term, knocked out, might literally come from practices like this. If the sponge didn't work effectively or quickly enough, it wasn't uncommon for the surgeon's assistant to simply use a wooden mallet to render the patient unconscious with a swift blow to the head. It was crude, but arguably more merciful than the alternative. You stumble out of the house into the pre-dawn chill, gasping for fresh air. You didn't save the boy's life. You didn't heal him. You were the ferryman. You took his conscious mind to a strange and terrifying other shore, just long enough for the brutal work to be done. You've just witnessed firsthand the most extreme application of your craft, a forced slumber at the very gates of death. The memory of the woodcutter's son, the smell of the sponge, the sound of the saw, lingers with you for weeks. It haunts your sleep, turning your dreams into a gallery of horrors. You throw yourself into your work, the mundane rhythm of grinding, sorting, and bottling a welcome distraction. Life in the village returns to its slow, predictable pace. The rye has been harvested, and the air carries the scent of baking bread, a comforting, wholesome smell that is the very essence of stability. For a time, the world feels normal again. The most potent substance you handle is a strong laxative for a constipated merchant. It's a blessed relief. But the peace is fragile. It begins subtly. A woman you know, the weaver's wife, complains of a strange sensation in her hands and feet, a tingling and crawling feeling under her skin, as if ants were marching through her veins. Alaric gives her a balm of chamomile and mint, dismissing it as a touch of nerve sickness from the damp weather. But then her children start complaining of the same thing. A few days later, a farmer on the other side of the village begins to have violent fits, his limbs twitching and jerking uncontrollably, his back arching so severely it seems his spine might snap. Within a week, it's a firestorm. The affliction spreads with terrifying speed, but not like a cough or a fever. It seems to pick its victims by household. One family will be struck down, writhing and screaming, while their next-door neighbors remain untouched. The initial tingling, which the priests are calling The sacred fire progresses to agonizing muscle cramps, convulsions, and a terrifying, waking nightmare. People are not just sick, they are possessed. You are called with Alaric to the weaver's cottage. The scene inside is pure chaos. The wife is thrashing on the floor, her limbs contorted at impossible angles. She is screaming, not in pain, but at visions only she can see, demons crawling on the ceiling, spiders pouring from the walls. Her eldest son is huddled in a corner, babbling nonsense and laughing hysterically. This isn't a job for a soporific sponge. This is madness. This is hell made manifest. The priest is already there, splashing holy water and chanting prayers of exorcism, but his rituals are as effective as trying to shout down a hurricane. This is the grim, historical reality of ergotism, a type of poisoning caused by a fungus, Claviceps purpurea, that grows on rye and other grains, particularly after a cold winter followed by a wet spring and summer. Exactly the weather you've had. The dark, purplish growths on the heads of rye, called ergots, are filled with potent psychoactive alkaloids. When the tainted grain is harvested and milled into flour, the poison is baked directly into the daily bread. You're not just eating your breakfast, you're eating a hallucinogen. It's a sourdough starter from the ninth circle of hell. There are two forms of this poisoning. One, the gangrenous kind, restricts blood flow, causing limbs to become infected, burn with searing pain, and eventually wither and fall off. The other, the convulsive kind, is what has struck your village. It attacks the central nervous system, causing all the horrors you are now witnessing. The condition was famously known as St. Anthony's fire, because the monks of the Order of St. Anthony were known for their particular skill and success in treating the affliction. Their secret wasn't prayer. It was the fact that their monasteries were often far from the afflicted areas, and they fed the victims bread made from clean, untainted wheat flour. The cure was simply a change in diet. You stand by the doorway, a bag of valerian and skullcap, herbs meant to soothe the nerves and prevent seizures, feeling utterly useless. What good is a gentle sedative against the demonic storm? The village is tearing itself apart. The healthy lock their doors, terrified of the madness. The afflicted are seen as cursed, punished by God for some hidden sin. The priest declares a day of fasting and prayer, which is, in a moment of profound irony, the single most effective thing he could do, as it stops people from eating the poisoned bread. Historians and sociologists still argue whether medieval communities genuinely believed these outbreaks were purely demonic possession, or if some, particularly physicians and apothecaries, suspected a natural, albeit mysterious, cause. Did Alaric see the work of Satan in the weaver's cottage, or did he see a pattern? A poisoning? He is a man of his time, and he speaks of curses and ill humors. But you see him looking, observing. He notes which families are struck and which are spared. His mind is working, searching for a worldly cause amidst the supernatural terror. Here is a truly fascinating and quirky theory. Many modern researchers believe that the Salem witch trials of 1692 were not caused by mass hysteria alone, but may have been triggered by an outbreak of convulsive ergotism. The symptoms described in the trial records, the fits, the pinching and crawling sensations on the skin, the bizarre visions and babbling, are a textbook match for the effects of the ergot fungus. The witches may have simply been the first victims, and their strange behavior was interpreted through a lens of profound religious fear. You watch as the weaver writhes on the floor, shouting about a great, horned beast that is sitting on her chest. Suddenly, some of the more creative demonic figures you've seen carved into the church facade make a terrifying amount of sense. Perhaps the artists weren't just imaginative. Perhaps they were just illustrating what they saw during the last bad harvest. Days later, the storm begins to pass. The fits become less frequent, the hallucinations fade, leaving the survivors weak, exhausted, and deeply traumatized. Some are left with a permanent tremor or a lingering confusion. The village is quiet again, but it's a wounded, suspicious quiet. You learn a new and profound lesson about your craft. Your master's poisons are deliberate, contained in jars, and administered with a careful hand. But the world itself has its own apothecary. It has poisons that can grow unseen in the very staff of life, turning a whole village into a madhouse, And there is no dose, no antidote, no cure. There is only the grim prayer that next year's harvest will be a clean one. The ghost of St. Anthony's fire still clings to the village. The fear has subsided into a sullen, weary suspicion. The bread is eaten with a new hesitation, each bite a small act of faith. In the shop, things are quiet. Alaric has you brewing calming tisanes and digestive aids, simple remedies for a community whose nerves are frayed and whose stomachs are in knots. The dramatic, dangerous plants remain in their locked chests. It seems as if the whole world is holding its breath. Then, one afternoon, the bell above the door jingles, and a man walks in who does not belong here. He is not a farmer or a craftsman. He is tall and lean, with skin tanned the color of old leather and crisscrossed with a fine network of wrinkles around his eyes, the kind you get from squinting into a relentless sun for years. He has a slight limp, and an old, puckered scar runs from his temple down into his beard. He carries himself with a stillness that is more intimidating than any bluster. He is a soldier, or was one. He brings with him the smell of dust from 1,000 miles away. He has come for a salve for his leg, he says in a rough, accented voice. The old wound aches when the damp sets in. As Alaric examines the gnarled scar tissue, you prepare a simple balm of comfort and willow bark. The man watches you work, his gaze sharp. He sees the jars of belladonna and henbane on the high shelf, and a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, crosses his face. You deal in powerful medicines, apothecary, he says. It is not a question. God provides the herbs. We only learn their use. Alaric replies noncommittally. The man grunts, a sound that might be agreement or dismissal. In the East, he says, his voice lowering slightly, they have herbs that do more than soothe an old soldier's aches. They have gardens that can show you paradise. Your ears prick up. You pause in your grinding. Alaric shoots you a warning glance, but the traveler is already lost in his memory. He tells you he was a man-at-arms on the Great Crusade, a soldier of the cross in the Holy Land. He speaks of scorching deserts, cities with walls of glittering tile, and fighting men who move with the speed and silence of snakes. And he tells you a story that makes the madness of the ergot eaters seem like a childish tantrum. He tells you of the Hashishin. The word sounds strange on his tongue. He says they are a sect of assassins, hidden in an impregnable mountain fortress called Alamut. They are led by a sorcerer, a prophet, a man they call the Old Man of the Mountain. This man, Hassanai Sabah, commands a loyalty so absolute that his followers will march to their deaths without question. And the source of this loyalty, the soldier says, is not faith alone. It is a taste of heaven. He describes how the old man finds strong, brave young men and brings them to his fortress. He gives them a special drink, and they fall into a deep, death-like sleep. While they are unconscious, they are carried into a secret valley, a hidden garden built within the mountain. When they awaken, they are in paradise. Fountains flow with wine and milk, the air is perfumed with jasmine, and the trees are heavy with every imaginable fruit. They are waited on by beautiful maidens with eyes like jewels, who sing to them and feed them delicacies. It's basically a pop-up VIP lounge for the divinely chosen. The young men spend a day living out this fantasy, convinced they have been given a glimpse of the afterlife promised to true believers. Then, the old man drugs them again. They fall asleep in paradise and awaken back in the cold, stone fortress. The old man tells them that he alone holds the key to that garden, and if they serve him faithfully and die in his service, they will return there for all eternity. The result? An army of fearless fanatics. But how? You whisper, forgetting your place. Magic? The soldier smiles a grim, knowing smile. A type of magic. The drink they are given is brewed with hashish. He explains that hashish is a potent, dark, sticky resin scraped from the flowers of the hemp plant, a plant you know only as a source for rope and rough cloth. This resin, when eaten or smoked, sends the mind to strange places. It doesn't cause the screaming madness of henbane, but a dreamy, pliable state where the world becomes strange and beautiful, and suggestion becomes reality. The historical fact is that the legend of the assassins, brought back to Europe by crusaders and later popularized by Marco Polo, is the source of our modern word. Assassin, a corruption of hashishin, meaning hashish eater. Historians and scholars of the period still argue whether this tale of the Paradise Garden is a literal truth or a masterful piece of propaganda. Modern analysis suggests it's almost certainly the latter. The Nizari Ismailis, the actual group behind the assassins, or a sophisticated and disciplined religious and political movement. The hashish story was likely a smear campaign spread by their enemies to demonize them, to explain their incredible bravery and loyalty not as a result of devotion, but of drug-fueled brainwashing. It was easier to believe they were high than to believe they were that committed. But as you listen to the soldier's tale, you believe every word. It makes a terrifying kind of sense. You've seen what the poppy can do, what the nightshade can do. Why not a plant that can build a heaven in a man's mind? A quirky fringe thought. You can't help but wonder about the logistics. The plumbing alone for those fountains would be a nightmare. Never mind keeping a secret garden staffed with angelic maidens hidden from the rest of the fortress. The soldier leaves with his salve, taking his sun-scorched certainty with him. You are left with a new and unsettling idea. The drugs you know are for healing the body, escaping pain, or, like the ergot, are a random, terrifying act of nature. But this hashish, as the story goes, is used for something else entirely. It's a tool for control. It is the art of manufacturing belief. You look at the jars on your master's shelves. You thought you were learning to be a healer. But the soldier's story reminds you that the same substances that can open the gates of peace can also be used to build the most beautiful prisons for the mind. The soldier's story about the Paradise Garden of the Hashishin has planted a thorny seed in your mind. You find yourself watching people differently, wondering about the secret gardens and hidden heavens they might cultivate for themselves. The idea that a simple plant resin could be used to build a faith, to command such loyalty, is a more potent magic than any spell you've ever heard whispered about. It's a practical magic, a magic of the mind. One gray, drizzly afternoon, an old woman named Elspeth shuffles into the shop. She lives alone in a ramshackle cottage at the edge of the woods, the kind of woman children tell stories about. She keeps to herself, mutters to her goats, and has an uncanny knack for knowing when the first frost will hit. She is not a regular customer. She normally treats her own aches with things she finds in the hedgerows. She doesn't ask for a cure. She asks for ingredients. Her shopping list is short, and it makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. A pinch of ground henbane leaf, a few dried belladonna berries, and a smidgen of the good butter, unsalted, clarified fat that Alaric keeps for making his finest salves. Alaric, who had been dozing in his chair, is suddenly wide awake. He looks at Elspeth for a long, silent moment. She meets his gaze without flinching. This is a transaction of unspoken understanding. He knows exactly what she is making. You know what she is making. She is gathering the components for a flying ointment. Your mind flashes back to the stories you've heard around the alehouse fire, the terrified whispers of the village priest. Stories of witches' sabbats, of midnight gatherings in dark woods where women dance with the devil, renounce their faith, and feast on unbaptized babies. And how do they get to these unholy festivals? They fly. On broomsticks, on goats, on the backs of demons. This ointment is supposedly the fuel for their flight. Alaric slowly gets to his feet, measures out the dangerous herbs with an unnerving calm, and takes the old woman's single silver coin. After she leaves, the shop feels colder, darker. You finally break the silence. Is she? You can't finish the sentence. Is she a witch? Alaric finishes for you, his voice flat. He sighs, a weary sound. She is an old, lonely woman who desires to fly. Whether that makes her a witch is a question for the priests, not for me. He picks up the mortar and pestle you used to grind the henbane. The body is a caged boy. Some use prayer to escape it. Some use ale. She uses a more direct method. He explains that the ointment isn't about defying gravity. It's about convincing the mind that gravity no longer applies. The thick animal fat is a base, a carrier. Its purpose is to hold the potent herbs and allow them to be absorbed through the skin. This transdermal delivery is a well-known principle in your craft. It's how many of your salves and plasters work. The key ingredients are the trio you know so well from Section 4, belladonna, henbane, mandrake. Sometimes wolfsbane or hemlock are added by those who are either very brave or very stupid. She will not fly to the moon, Alaric says, cleaning the pestle with a cloth. She will lie on her pallet, her heart racing like a trapped bird, and her spirit will journey. She will feel the rushing wind, see the world spread out below her like a tapestry. The henbane gives the sensation of flight. The belladonna provides the vision she will meet when she gets there. It is a powerful dream, nothing more. He pauses. But a dream that can kill you if you are careless. The historical fact is that recipes for these psychoactive salves, or unguents, appear in numerous historical texts from the early modern period. Giambattista della Porta, a 16th century Italian scholar, described interrogating a witch who, after applying the ointment, fell into a deep, death-like trance and, upon waking, gave a detailed account of her journey over mountains and seas. Historians and folklorists still argue whether the idea of the witch's sabbat was a genuine, pre-Christian folk tradition experienced through these hallucinatory ointments, or if it was almost entirely an invention of inquisitors. The theory goes that the inquisitors, convinced they were fighting a vast satanic conspiracy, would ask leading questions under torture. Did you fly to the sabbat? Did you kiss the devils behind? And the terrified victims would confess to anything to make the pain stop. The narrative was built from forced confessions, not from genuine experience. And now for the quirky, and famously speculative, tidbit, the broomstick. Why a broomstick? The common image is of a witch sitting on it like a horse. But the pharmacology offers a more practical and intimate explanation. The alkaloids in the ointment are absorbed most efficiently through mucous membranes. To get the strongest effect, the salve would be applied to the moist tissues of the armpits, or, more effectively, the genitals. The broom handle, or a similar tool like a distaff, would have been the perfect applicator. So the image of a witch, riding a broomstick may be a literal, if misunderstood, description of the application process, which then becomes entwined with the subsequent hallucination of flight. It's less about transportation and more about a very targeted drug delivery system. You look at the door that the old woman disappeared through. You picture her alone in her cottage, preparing her strange flight. She isn't a monster from a fairy tale. She is a pharmacologist of the folk tradition, using the potent chemistry of the earth to unlock the cages of her body and her dreary, lonely life. The flying ointment is not magic. It's a recipe. It's applied science, albeit a terrifyingly dangerous and unsanctioned branch of it. And you, the apothecary's apprentice, you work in the place that sells the keys. The encounter with Elspeth and her quiet request for the ingredients of flight has left you deeply unsettled. The line between your master's craft and the forbidden practices of the village outcasts seems to be drawn not in stone, but in smoke. Alaric seems to sense your unease. Fear is born of ignorance, he mutters one morning, seeing you hesitate before handling the nightshade leaves. To master the plant, you must know the plant. All of it. Not just the whispers and the wives' tales. To illustrate his point, he decides it is time for you to learn about the most feared of the trio, the mandrake. He leads you not to his neat, cultivated garden behind the shop, but out into the wilder, scrubbier land beyond the village fields. Mandrake is shy, he explains. It does not like the tidy world of men. It prefers to grow where things have been disturbed. Old battlefields, forgotten graveyards, or at the foot of a gallows. This, you know, is the heart of the mandrake's terrifying reputation. It's a mainstream historical belief, recorded by scholars like the Roman-era naturalist Pliny the Elder, that the mandrake root, Mandragora officinarum, grows best in ground soaked with the bodily fluids of the dead, specifically the dripping fat and seed of a hanged man. This belief gave the plant a deeply sinister aura. It was quite literally born of death and sin. To possess it was to possess a piece of that dark energy. You walk for what feels like an hour before Alaric stops. He points with his staff to a low-growing plant with broad, dark green leaves, almost like a tobacco plant, nestled in the shade of a gnarled oak. A few small, purplish, bell-shaped flowers cling to its base. It looks unassuming, almost drab. But beneath the soil, lies the prize. "No," Alaric says, his voice taking on the tone of a storyteller. "The folklore is clear. The mandrake root is shaped like a man. To pull it from the earth is to murder it. And when it is pulled, it lets out a scream so terrible that any living thing that hears it will die instantly. You've heard these stories since you were a child. It's the ultimate booby trap of the botanical world. So, how do you harvest it?" Alaric describes the elaborate, ritualized process. "You must go to the plant at night, under a full moon. You must draw 3 circles around it with an iron sword, facing west. Then, you must tie a strong cord to the plant's stem. The other end of the cord is tied around the neck of a dog, a hungry black dog, preferably one you don't particularly like. You then retreat to a safe distance, plug your ears with wax or pitch, and hold out a piece of meat. The hungry dog, lunging for the meat, will pull the root from the ground. The dog will hear the scream and die, its life a sacrifice to pay for the root. You can then safely retrieve your prize." This elaborate tale is the most famous quirky tidbit associated with any plant in history. It's a fantastic, dramatic story. It's also, Alaric explains with a wry smile, complete nonsense designed to do 2 things. First, to scare off amateurs and protect the valuable knowledge of the professional herbalist. And second, to drive up the price. If a customer believes you had to risk your life and sacrifice a perfectly good dog to get the root, they'll pay a lot more for a small piece of it. It's the medieval version of a celebrity endorsement combined with a "Do not try this at home" warning. The only scream you will hear, Alaric says, kneeling down, is the sound of your own back if you pull it up wrong. He begins to dig carefully around the base of the plant with a small trowel, loosening the earth in a wide circle. The soil is rich and dark. He digs for a long time, patiently, methodically. Finally, he works his hands deep into the loose earth and pulls. With a soft, sucking sound, the root comes free. He holds it up. It is breathtaking. The root is thick and fleshy, a pale, earthy brown. And it is forked. It genuinely looks like a small, malformed humanoid figure, a grotesque little man with stumpy legs and a bulbous head. The resemblance is uncanny and deeply unsettling. This anthropomorphism is the source of its power and its legend. To hold it feels like holding a tiny golem made of earth. Historians and botanists still argue about the origins of the mandrake's man-like shape. Is it purely a coincidence of its taproot structure, or was there some selective pressure? Perhaps ancient herbalists, for thousands of years, selectively cultivated and replanted the most human-looking roots, artificially breeding the plant to enhance the very feature that made it so valuable and magical. Were they early masters of selective breeding, guided by the doctrine of signatures? Alaric takes out his knife and cuts a small piece from the root's leg. A strange, sweet, earthy smell fills the air. He explains the mandrake's real power. Like its cousins, it is a potent source of the same alkaloids. It is a powerful anesthetic, a soporific, a hallucinogen, and in high doses, a poison. A small amount steeped in wine can induce a deep, dreamless sleep, making it another key ingredient for a soporific sponge. It was also considered a powerful aphrodisiac, its human shape linking it to fertility and passion. A man might carry a piece to increase his virility, or a woman might place it under her bed to help her conceive a child. You walk back to the shop, the precious root wrapped carefully in a damp cloth. You've learned a crucial lesson today. You've seen how folklore can be a smokescreen, a tall tale built around a kernel of truth to protect knowledge and increase value. The mandrake doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. Its real power lies not in its voice, but in the complex chemistry hidden within its strange, man-shaped flesh, and in the even more powerful stories that men have wrapped around it like a shroud. A few weeks after the mandrake lesson, Alaric hands you a carefully wrapped parcel and a heavy jug. "To the Abbey of St. Giles," he says. "Brother Thomas is expecting this. And do not dawdle. The Benedictines value punctuality. The Abbey is a world away from your own, a fortress of faith that sits on a hill overlooking the town, its stone walls a stark, clean line against the messy sprawl of mortal life. You've seen it from a distance your whole life, but you've never been inside. The journey up the hill is a journey through changing atmospheres. The smells of the village, manure, wood smoke, humanity, fall away, replaced by the clean scent of pine and damp earth. When you reach the massive oak gate and pull the iron ring, the sound echoes in a profound silence. A porter, a lay brother with a face as placid as a pond, lets you in without a word, leading you through a series of stone cloisters that feel cool and serene even on this warm day. The chaos of the world is not just kept out by the walls. It feels like it cannot exist here. The air itself is different, calmer, thinner, holier. You are led to the infirmary garden, and it is a revelation. Unlike Alaric's cramped, chaotic patch or Elspeth's wild hedgerow, this garden is a masterpiece of order. Raised beds, laid out in a perfect geometric grid, are filled with every medicinal herb you can imagine, and many you can't. Each bed has a small wooden marker with the plant's name neatly lettered in Latin. It's less a garden and more a living library. This, you realize, is a perfect, mainstream historical fact. Following the collapse of the Roman Empire, it was the monasteries that became the primary repositories of classical medical and botanical knowledge. They painstakingly copied and preserved the ancient texts of Dioscorides and Galen, and their infirmary gardens were the most advanced research centers of the age. Brother Thomas, the infirmerer, is waiting for you. He is a small, neat man with clever hands and eyes that seem to see right through you. He thanks you for the delivery, a rare shipment of blessed thistle seeds and a jug of wine from a specific southern vineyard, known for its strength. He inspects the seeds with a practiced eye, then invites you to see his garden. He speaks of the herbs with a quiet passion that reminds you of Alaric, but the language is different. Alaric speaks of humors and properties. Brother Thomas speaks of God's wisdom. Each plant, he says, gesturing to a bed of fragrant hyssop, is a prayer. A solution provided by the Creator for the ailments of the body He created. It is our sacred duty to learn their grammar. He shows you the sleeping quarters for the sick, the potions for coughs, the poultices for wounds. It is all very practical, very much like your own shop. But then he leads you to a smaller, more secluded part of the garden. Here, the plants are different. You see valerian, hops, and skullcap, all known for their calming properties. But you also see a few carefully tended specimens that look suspiciously like henbane, and a single, thriving poppy, its head swollen and ready. You must look surprised, because a faint smile touches his lips. The soul can be infirm, just as the body can, he says softly. Our life is one of prayer and contemplation. But the mind is a noisy, restless thing. The belly cries out during a long fast. The memory of the world intrudes upon the sacred texts. The burden of the flesh can be heavy. He picks a leaf from a hops vine. It's a quirky historical fact that the famous Abbess Hildegard of von Bingen wrote about hops in the 12th century, noting that while it was an excellent preservative for beer, it also weighs down the intestines and brings a certain melancholy to a man's soul. Brother Thomas seems to agree. Hops in the evening ale brings sleep, he says, but a tea made from its flowers can quiet the chattering monkeys of the mind before evening vespers. It allows for a deeper focus on the divine. He is admitting, in his own coded way, to using these plants not just for sickness, but for spiritual engineering. He is not trying to fly to the Sabbath or see a false paradise. He is trying to chemically assist his own piety. A touch of opium in a tincture doesn't just kill pain, it dulls the gnawing hunger of a multi-day fast. A small dose of a calming herb doesn't just treat anxiety, it helps a monk endure the profound, crushing solitude of a life dedicated to silence. It's the medieval version of a monk using nootropics or biohacking his way to enlightenment. Historians and theologians still argue whether this kind of psychoactive assistance was a hidden but accepted part of monastic mystical practice, or if it was a rare and heretical deviation. The official position of the Church was that any vision or ecstatic state not directly granted by God was suspect, likely the work of the devil. But in the quiet privacy of a cloistered life, who would know if a monk's deep, meditative trance was aided by something other than pure faith. The line between a medicinal sedative and a contemplative aid is a matter of intention, not chemistry. You leave the abbey as the afternoon bell rings out for prayers, the sound pure and clear. You have seen a new facet of the altered state. The high of the alehouse is for escape. The high of the witch's ointment is for transcendence. The high of the poppy is for peace. But the high of the monk is for control. It is a subtle, disciplined, and focused intoxication. It is the use of God's pharmacopoeia to grease the wheels of devotion, to silence the static of the self so that one might, just might, hear a whisper from the divine. You realize that the search for a way out of one's own head is not limited to the desperate and the profane. It is a universal human quest, pursued even here, in the silent, stony heart of faith. The rhythms of the apothecary's shop have become your own. You know the weight of the pestle, the rustle of dried leaves, the precise heat needed to render tallow for a salve. You have seen how the plants in this room can bring peace, induce madness, feign death, grant flight, and even aid in prayer. You think you are beginning to understand the scope of your craft. You are wrong. One blustery autumn day, a man enters the shop who is different from your usual clientele. He's a trader, that much is clear from his heavy woolen cloak and sturdy boots. But his trade is not in local goods. He deals in amber from the cold northern seas, and his face is weathered by a salt-laced wind you have never felt. He has come to barter for a small supply of willow bark for the aches in his joints. But his eyes, pale as a winter sky, skim the shelves with a professional curiosity. He points a thick finger towards the familiar jar of henbane. "In my grandfather's time," he says, his voice a low rumble, "men used that plant for more than just toothaches." Alaric, who is weighing the amber in a small bronze scale, looks up. "Oh, they used it to call the beast," the trader says simply. He then tells a story not of secret gardens or holy contemplation, but of blood and fury. He speaks of the Northmen, the Vikings, who raided the coastlands a few generations back. And he speaks of their most terrifying warriors, the berserkers. You've heard the tales, of course. They are bogeymen used to frighten children. But this man speaks of them as history. He describes men who, before a battle, would enter a state of frenzy, a berserker gang. They would howl like wolves, bite the iron rims of their shields, and throw off their mail shirts, fighting bare-chested in a trance of pure rage. They seemed to feel no pain from sword or spear, and they possessed a strength that was more animal than human. They were the one-man wrecking crew of the early medieval world, a force of nature on the battlefield. After the battle, they would collapse, weak and sick for days, with little to no memory of what they had done. The mainstream historical explanation, the one the priests favor, is that these men were possessed by demons, or that they entered their fury through pagan rituals, working themselves into a hypnotic state of bloodlust. But the trader scoffs at this. "Rituals help," he concedes, "but you cannot chant your way into shrugging off an axe wound." No, they had help. They had the beast's herb. He taps the counter near the henbane jar. Alaric nods slowly. "I have read of this theory in the old chronicles. Some scholars blame a different culprit. A mushroom. The one with the red cap and white spots." He is referring, you realize, to the fly agaric, or Amanita muscaria. You've seen it growing in the birch forests, a beautiful, poisonous toadstool that looks like it was plucked from a fairy tale. For a long time, this was the leading theory, the idea that Viking berserkers ate these hallucinogenic mushrooms to fuel their rage. "The mushroom is too unpredictable," the trader counters, sounding like a seasoned pharmacologist. "It gives visions, yes, and strength. But it can also make you laugh like a fool or fall down twitching. It is not a reliable war drug." He leans forward, his voice dropping. "But henbane is different." You look at the jar of foul-smelling leaves. The same leaves that went into the soporific sponge in Elspeth's flying ointment. The trader continues, "It makes the face flush red and hot. It steals your reason and replaces it with fire. It gives you the strength of a bear and the mind of a wolf. And afterwards? It leaves you sick, confused, and with a hole in your memory. It fits the stories perfectly." It is the key that unlocks the cage and lets the monster out. This is a very real and heated scholarly debate. What, if anything, was the berserker's secret? While the fly agaric theory was popular for many years, many historians and toxicologists now favor the henbane hypothesis precisely for the reasons the traitor lays out. The symptoms of henbane poisoning, delirium, agitation, flushed skin, dilated pupils, disorientation, and subsequent amnesia and stupor, are a much closer match to the descriptions of the berserker gang found in the Icelandic sagas than the effects of Amanita muscaria. Here's a quirky fact to underscore how terrifyingly disruptive these warriors were. Berserkers were eventually outlawed. The Gragas, the medieval Icelandic law code, explicitly states that a berserker in a rage could be sentenced to lesser outlawry. Even their own famously rough-and-tumble society recognized that these guys were a liability. Having a warrior who couldn't distinguish between friend and foe and was prone to fits of uncontrollable rage was, to put it mildly, bad for unit cohesion. Even the Vikings had to tell them to take it down a notch. The traitor finishes his story, gathers his willow bark, and leaves, taking the scent of the cold sea with him. You are left staring at the jar of henbane. You have seen it as a tool for peace, for dreams, for surgery, for prayer. Now you see it in a new, terrifying light. It is a tool for war. It is a substance that can strip away the veneer of humanity and turn a man into a mindless killing machine. The same pinch of powder that could send an old woman's spirit soaring through the clouds could send a warrior's axe crashing through a skull, all without a shred of pity or memory. The thought is chilling. Your shop is not just a place of medicine. It is an arsenal. The Nordic trader's dismissal of the fly agaric mushroom in favor of henbane lingers in your thoughts. Alaric's mention of it was brief, almost an academic footnote, but it piqued your curiosity. Henbane, belladonna, the poppy, these are plants you are beginning to understand. They have a certain grim predictability. But the mushroom feels different. It is not something you can cultivate in a neat garden bed or harvest with a simple knife. It is a child of the deep woods, of shadow and rot, a flicker of impossible color in the gloom of the forest floor. It belongs to an older world. One afternoon, when Alaric is busy with a wealthy client, a furrier with a persistent and odorous skin condition, you find yourself with a rare moment of freedom. Driven by this new curiosity, you slip out of the shop and head for the birch woods north of the town. You tell yourself you are just gathering firewood, but you know you are looking for something else. You walk deeper into the woods than you ever have before. The trees stand close together, their white bark like bone in the filtered light. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and decaying leaves. It is quiet here, a living silence composed of the rustle of unseen things and the distant call of a crow. After nearly an hour of searching, you find one. And it is breathtaking. Pushing up through a bed of brown pine needles is a single, perfect specimen of Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric. Its cap is a brilliant, almost luminous scarlet, dotted with flecks of pure white, the remnants of the universal veil it broke through as it grew. It looks exactly like the toadstools in the margins of the illuminated manuscripts in the abbey. It's so beautiful it seems unreal, a jewel dropped by a careless giant. It radiates a kind of dangerous charisma. This isn't a humble plant, it's an announcement. You remember the trader's words. Too unpredictable. You kneel down, examining it, but not touching it. You know its reputation. Its very name, fly agaric, comes from a well-known historical practice. For centuries, it was broken up into milk to act as a primitive fly killer. The flies, attracted to the milk, would drink it, become intoxicated, and crash into the walls, stunned or dead. You are looking at nature's first and most flamboyant insecticide. But its use on flies is trivial. Its real power, as Alaric hinted and the trader confirmed, lies in its effect on the human mind. The mushroom contains two primary psychoactive compounds, ibotenic acid and muscimol. When you eat it fresh, the ibotenic acid is a potent neurotoxin that causes many of the negative effects: nausea, twitching, drooling, confusion. However, when the mushroom is dried, or cooked, or processed through a living body, the ibotenic acid converts into muscimol, a much more potent and less toxic hallucinogen. This is where the really quirky, and famously bizarre, historical tidbit comes in. Shamans in Siberia, particularly among peoples like the Koryak, developed a unique and startlingly efficient way to consume the mushroom while bypassing the worst of the side effects. The shaman would eat the mushrooms. His body would then do the hard work of metabolizing the toxins and converting the ibotenic acid into the cleaner high of muscle. The psychoactive compounds are then excreted, largely unchanged, in his urine. Other members of the tribe would then drink the shaman's urine to get a second-hand, pre-processed high. This cycle could apparently continue for up to 5 or 6 passes, a sacred and very personal recycling program. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, piss drunk. You look at the beautiful, deadly mushroom and try to imagine this. It's a world away from the careful grinding and weighing of the apothecary shop. This is a raw, primal, and deeply visceral kind of pharmacology. Historians, ethnobotanists, and religious scholars still have a fierce debate about the role of Amanita muscaria in the development of ancient religions. A particularly famous, and controversial, theory proposed by John Marco Allegro in his book The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross suggests that early Christianity was itself a fertility cult based on the ritualistic consumption of this very mushroom. He argued that Jesus was not a person but a code for the mushroom, and that the stories in the Bible are allegorical descriptions of hallucinatory trips. This theory is, to put it mildly, on the extreme fringe and has been almost universally rejected by mainstream scholars. But it highlights the profound power and mystery that this single organism holds. Was it the original tree of knowledge? As you stare at the toadstool, you begin to understand the trader's point about its unpredictability. Unlike the measured dose from a jar of dried leaves, how could you ever know the potency of a single mushroom? One might be weak, another overwhelmingly strong. The effects are also famously variable. It can produce euphoria, visions, and a sense of connection to the world. It can also cause fear, agitation, and a complete detachment from reality. One of its most commonly reported effects is macropsia and micropsia, a distortion of size perception where objects can seem gigantic one moment and tiny the next. It's the Alice in Wonderland effect, and it's no wonder some believe Lewis Carroll was familiar with its properties. You don't pick the mushroom. You have no dog to test it on, no Siberian shaman to process it for you. You just look, committing its dangerous beauty to memory. The henbane might be the beast's herb, the key to a warrior's rage. But this is something else. This is the jester's cap, the madman's jewel, the key to a world of unpredictable chaos. It is a door you are not ready to open. You leave it there, a splash of scarlet in the quiet woods, and head back to the familiar, predictable dangers of the shop. You return from the birch woods with the image of that scarlet toadstool burned into your mind. Back in the familiar, dusty air of the shop, you feel a strange sense of relief. The fly agaric represents a wild, unknowable magic. Its potency is a secret kept by the mushroom itself. Here, at least, things are different. The poppy, the henbane, the belladonna, they are known quantities. Their dangers are catalogued, their properties studied. Here, you have mortars and pestles, scales and measures. Here, you have a semblance of control. It is a comforting thought. It is also completely wrong. That afternoon, the illusion is shattered. A breathless servant from the house of Master Valerius, the town's wealthiest wool merchant, bursts into the shop. His master is in agony. The stone, the servant gasps. He is roaring like a bull and his urine is red. He begs for relief. The stone. A kidney stone. A torment that can bring the strongest man to his knees. Alaric's face becomes a mask of grim professionalism. This is a high-stakes problem. Master Valerius is not just any patient, he is a patron. His goodwill keeps the shop stocked with expensive imported ingredients. Failure is not an option. But the only thing that can touch the deep, visceral pain of a passing stone is a remedy that walks the razor's edge of death. The black phial, Alaric says to you, his voice sharp. And the small bronze scale. Be quick. You retrieve the items. The phial contains a tincture of opium, far more concentrated than the raw gum. The scale is a delicate instrument, two small copper pans hanging from a central beam. It's perfect for weighing saffron or peppercorns. It is terrifyingly inadequate for what you are about to do. Alaric sets out a small, glazed dish. "We will need a base of wine," he begins, "and to it we add a single drop from the phial." He uses a sliver of wood to carefully let one, viscous, dark drop fall into the wine. "Now," he says, turning to you, "the belladonna. It will quiet the spasms. We need a pinch. No more." He gestures to the jar of finely powdered, dried belladonna leaves. A pinch. That's the instruction. The difference between a dose that will relax the merchant's urinary tract and a dose that will send his heart into a frantic, galloping rhythm before stopping altogether is a pinch. You look at your own fingers, then at Alaric's long, skeletal ones. Your pinch and his pinch are two very different things. This isn't science. It's a terrifying form of culinary guesswork. It's like trying to bake a cake where using a tablespoon instead of a teaspoon doesn't just make it taste bad, it makes it explode. You take a small amount of the greenish powder between your thumb and forefinger. Your heart is hammering. Too little, and the merchant continues to suffer, and Alaric loses face. Too much, and you are an accomplice to a fatal overdose. The weight of a man's life rests on the sensitivity of your fingertips. This is the central, terrifying truth of your craft. There is no standardization. Every batch of herbs is different, its potency varying based on the soil it grew in, the time of year it was harvested, the amount of sun it received. And your tools for measurement are ludicrously imprecise. A mainstream historical fact of medieval pharmacology is that complex remedies like theriac, a fabled cure-all containing over 60 ingredients including viper's flesh and opium, were incredibly difficult to replicate. The formula for Venice theriac was a state secret, but even with the same recipe, the batch made in Venice would be different from the one made in Genoa, because the ingredients, the climate, and the hands that made it were all different. You add your tiny, trembling pinch to the wine. It swirls, a greenish cloud in the dark liquid. "Is it enough?" Alaric asks, his eyes boring into you. You stare at the mixture, trying to judge by color, by instinct. You have no other guide. I think so." "You think?" he snaps. "Thinking is for priests. An apothecary knows." He dips the very tip of his little finger into the mixture and touches it to his tongue. His eyes close for a second. "A fraction more. As much as you can fit on the point of a needle." This is the quirky, and frankly insane, reality of your quality control. Your master is microdosing a potent poison to check its strength. And his new unit of measurement, the amount that fits on a needle point, is somehow even more terrifyingly vague than a pinch. You dip a needle in, and a few specks of powder cling to the tip. You tap them in. Alaric tastes it again. He nods, satisfied. The relief that floods through you is so intense it makes you dizzy. Historians still argue whether this profound lack of standardization was seen as a failing by medieval practitioners, or if it was embraced as part of the art and mystery of the profession. Did they see it as a flaw to be overcome, or did they believe that a master apothecary's intuition, his ability to judge a pinch based on the patient's specific humoral imbalance, the weather, or even the alignment of the stars, was a higher form of medicine than any rigid formula? They might have seen our quest for standardization as crude and impersonal. The servant is called back in, the precious, deadly concoction is poured into a small vial, and he rushes away with it. And then you wait. The next few hours are agonizing. Every time the shop bell rings, you jump. You are suspended in a state of profound uncertainty. The man in the birch woods with his wild mushrooms seemed like a gambler. But you see now that you are no different. Every dose you prepare is a roll of the dice. You have left the wildness of the forest only to find a more subtle, but no less deadly, wildness right here, in the supposed safety of your shop, in the simple, terrifying peril of the pinch. The wool merchant, Master Valerius, survives. A few days after you mix the perilous concoction, his grateful servant returns with a heavy purse of silver coins for Alaric, and a smaller one for you. The relief is profound. But the memory of your trembling hand holding that pinch of belladonna has left its mark. You've learned that precision in your craft is a terrifying illusion. You settle back into a comfortable routine, grinding harmless roots and bottling cough syrups. Then, one evening, just as twilight bleeds across the sky, a different kind of desperation walks through the door. It's not a servant of the rich or a hardened soldier. It's a young man named Will, a stable hand from the Lord's manor. He's shy, perpetually smells of hay and horses, and is so tongue-tied he can barely ask for what he wants. He twists a dirty cap in his hands, his eyes fixed on the floorboards. He doesn't have a sickness. He has a heartache. He is hopelessly, desperately in love with one of the ladies-in-waiting at the manor, a girl as far above his station as the moon. He has tried talking to her, he mumbles, but the words turn to stones in his mouth. He has saved for months. He wants a love potion. Alaric, who had been studying his ledger, looks up slowly. A long silence stretches. You expect him to laugh, to send the boy away with a cynical remark? To your surprise, he doesn't. He simply looks at Will, his gaze analytical, almost sympathetic. "Love is not a sickness I can cure, boy," he says, his voice softer than usual. "And it cannot be bottled. But there are charms." Will pleads, finally looking up, his eyes full of pathetic hope. "Spells, filters. There are mixtures." Alaric corrects him gently. "They are not magic. They are chemistry and suggestion. They are dangerous, and they often fail. And if you are caught, the girl will not be the only one to call you a beast. The priest will call you a sorcerer." Will is undeterred. He empties his small, worn purse onto the counter. It's a pathetic pile of copper and a few silver pieces, but for him, it is clearly a fortune. Alaric sighs. The pragmatist in him has won. "Very well," he says. "But you will listen to my instructions precisely. This is not a child's game." As Alaric begins to assemble the ingredients, he explains the principle to you. "This is a lesson you won't find in any medical text. We are not creating love," he whispers, pulling down a bottle of strong dark wine. "We are creating an opportunity. We will quiet the fearful mind, warm the blood, and create a moment of confusion. The rest is up to him." First, the base, wine. Alcohol is the oldest and most reliable tool for lowering inhibitions. Then, he adds a few crushed cardamom pods and a single, precious clove. "These are the spices of the faraway East," he says. "They will make the drink taste exotic, mysterious. It will make it feel like a potion. This part is for her mind." Next, he pulls down a jar of dried orchid root, a specific kind known as satyrion. This is a classic doctrine of signature's ingredient. The small, paired tubers of the orchid look uncannily like testicles, and for that reason, it has been considered a powerful aphrodisiac for centuries. This is a well-known historical fact. The name itself is derived from the Greek word for satyr, the famously lustful woodland spirits. But then comes the real work. Alaric looks at you. "A little of the mandrake's cousin," he murmurs, gesturing to the belladonna. "Not a pinch. Not a needlepoint. A scraping. The barest dust." He wants to add a sub-threshold dose of the deliriant. Not enough to cause visions, but just enough to work on the body. To make the heart beat faster, to make the skin feel flushed and warm, to dilate the pupils, and to create a slight, dizzying sense of disorientation. The target will not know why she feels this way. She will feel a sudden, overwhelming, physiological cascade, and if this clumsy boy is saying the right things at that exact moment, her mind might just interpret the chemical confusion as the dizzying onset of passion. Historians and legal scholars still argue about how seriously the church and secular authorities took the crime of administering love potions. On one hand, it was often condemned in sermons as a form of demonic coercion, an attempt to subvert God's gift of free will. On the other, prosecutions were often for fraud rather than sorcery, unless something went horribly wrong. Was it seen as a genuine threat to the social and spiritual order, or a foolish superstition practiced by the desperate and gullible? The answer likely depended on who was accused, and who the victim was. For a final touch of pure, unadulterated superstition, Alaric adds the quirkiest ingredient of all. He takes a tiny, desiccated bird's heart from a small box, the heart of a turtledove, and grinds it to a fine powder. Sympathy, he explains. The turtledove mates for life. Its loyalty is legendary. This part is for his courage. It is a placebo for the lovesick boy himself. He hands the finished, corked bottle to Will with a final, stark warning. Give her only 1 cup. Pour it when she is not looking. And when she drinks it, you must be there. You must speak your heart. If you are not there, the moment will be wasted, or worse, she will attach the feeling to the next man she sees. The potion only opens the door. You still have to have the courage to walk through it. Will leaves, clutching the bottle as if it were the Holy Grail. You are left with a sour taste in your mouth. This is not healing. This is not even the grim necessity of the soporific sponge. This is deception. You have just helped to weaponize your craft for the purpose of manipulating emotion. You created a potion that is 1 part pharmacology, 1 part psychology, and 1 part pure theater, a risky concoction designed to counterfeit a miracle. The stable hand, Will, does not return to the shop. You don't know if his desperate plan succeeded, if he won the heart of his lady, or if he is now languishing in the manor's dungeon for his audacity. You try not to think about it. But the act of creating the love potion has changed the atmosphere of the shop for you. It no longer feels like a place of pure healing. You feel like a conspirator. Every time you handle the belladonna, you don't just see a medicine, you see the scraping you added to the wine. You remember the fine line you walked, not between healing and death, but between medicine and manipulation. This new, lingering guilt is given a face a few days later. The bell over the door jingles, but the man who enters is not a customer. It is Father Gregor, the parish priest. He is a tall, imposing man who always seems to suck the warmth and light out of any room he enters. He doesn't bring the smell of earth or commerce with him. He smells of cold stone, old incense, and righteousness. Alaric, who is bent over a text, straightens up slowly. His face becomes impassive, a careful mask. Father Gregor doesn't browse. He stands in the center of the room, his dark robes absorbing the dusty sunlight, his hands clasped behind his back. Master Alaric, he says, his voice a low, resonant hum. I have come from the manor. There is talk. Alaric says nothing, merely inclines his head. Talk of foolish boys and even more foolish ambitions. The priest continues, his eyes sweeping over the shelves, lingering for a long, uncomfortable moment on the jars of mandrake and henbane. Talk of affections, unnaturally won. Your blood turns to ice. He knows. He must know. You try to look busy, grinding a harmless bit of ginger root, but you feel his gaze like a physical weight. The making of philters and charms, Father Gregor says, his voice hardening, is not medicine. It is an attempt to usurp the will of God. It is the sin of sorcery. He is speaking, you realize, from a script. This is not a conversation, it is a warning. It is a well-established fact that the early medieval church created manuals for priests, called penitentials, which listed specific sins and their required penances. These texts frequently and explicitly condemned practitioners of folk magic, including the brewing of love potions, as a serious offense against God. Father Gregor is, in essence, reading you the charges. He takes a step closer to the workbench, his shadow falling over you. There are herbs God has given us for healing. Holy herbs. He points a long finger at a bundle of dried yellow flowers hanging from the rafters. St. John's wort. A blessed plant. The fuga demonum. It drives out the demons of melancholy and protects the soul. This is the quirky and deeply revealing part of the church's stance. They didn't ban all potent herbs, they co-opted them. St. John's wort, a plant with genuine, observable psychoactive properties, it's a mild antidepressant, was rebranded. It wasn't just a plant, it was a holy weapon. This gave the church control over its use. It was safe because it was theirs. But these others... Father Gregor's gaze drifts back to the forbidden shelf. These are the devil's garden. They open the mind not to God, but to delusion. They invite foul spirits. They are a gateway to damnation. He looks from the jars to Alaric, his eyes narrowed. I trust, Master Apothecary, that your work remains firmly on the side of the angels. It is a threat, wrapped in the silken ribbon of piety. Alaric bows his head slightly. My only work, Father, is to ease the suffering of the flesh, as our Lord taught. I am a humble servant of the body, not a master of souls. It is a masterful non-answer, both respectful and defiant. Father Gregor holds his gaze for a moment longer, then gives a curt nod and sweeps out of the shop, leaving a chill in his wake. For a long time, there is only the sound of your own breathing. Finally, Alaric lets out a long, slow breath. The original HR department, he mutters, but with more brimstone. He runs a hand over his weary face. He smells the coin from the Valerius purse, and he worries his own collection plate will grow lighter. This has less to do with God and more to do with his own authority. Historians still argue whether the Church's suppression of folk medicine and herbalism was primarily a theological crusade to stamp out lingering paganism, or a more practical, political power play to centralize all forms of healing and authority under its own control. By positioning itself as the sole arbiter of what was holy medicine and what was demonic sorcery, the Church ensured that people turned to its priests, its saints, and its relics for salvation, not to the old woman in the woods or the man with the knowledge of roots and leaves. You finally understand the true danger of your profession. It's not just the peril of the pinch, the risk of an overdose, or the madness of a bad trip. It is the peril of the political. You are a rival institution. The knowledge you and Alaric hold is a source of power that exists outside the Church's control, and that makes you a threat. Every successful cure you create, every bit of peace you provide, is a testament to a power that doesn't flow from the altar. The fear you feel now is colder and deeper than anything the plants themselves could induce. It is the fear of being on the wrong side of an institution that deals in absolutes, an institution that possesses not just the keys to heaven, but also the wood, the ropes, and the fire for a very real, earthly hell. The chill from Father Gregor's visit doesn't leave the shop. It settles in the corners like a damp fog, a constant, unspoken presence. You and Alaric work in a state of heightened awareness. Every customer who enters is scrutinized. Is this a genuine sufferer or a spy sent by the priest? The fear is exhausting. It's a poison of the mind, and you have no antidote for it on your shelves. The future, which once seemed a distant country, now feels like a dark forest you are about to enter, and you are desperate for a map. This desperation gnaws at you. One night, long after Alaric has retired to his chamber, you find you cannot sleep. The question, what happens next, echoes in the silence. You remember the stories, the ones whispered far from the priest's ears, of men and women who could look into the future, who could divine the hidden paths of fate. They didn't use prayer. They used tools. And you are in a room full of tools. You make a decision born of fear and a foolish, youthful curiosity. You are going to try it. You are going to scry the future. You move silently through the darkened shop. You don't have a crystal ball or a polished obsidian mirror. The best you can manage is a wide, shallow clay bowl filled with water, which you place on the floor. It's slightly murky water that a frog probably bathed in yesterday, but it will have to do. Next, you fetch a small charcoal brazier and light it, the flint and steel scraping loudly in the quiet. You hold your breath, listening for any sound from Alaric's room. Nothing. You coax the coals to a dull, red glow. The medieval equivalent of a smoke detector is when you pass out from asphyxiation, so you know you have to be quick. Now for the active ingredient. You unlock the chest where the most potent seeds are kept. Your hand hovers over the belladonna, the mandrake. You settle on the henbane. You remember the Nordic trader's story of the berserker's rage, and Elspeth's flying ointment. It is a plant of fire and dreams. You take a small, forbidden pinch of its tiny, black seeds. You sit on the floor before your meager setup. This practice has an ancient lineage. This is a well-established historical fact. The great oracle at Delphi, the most famous prophetess of the ancient world, almost certainly delivered her cryptic prophecies under the influence of intoxicating fumes. Modern geological surveys of her temple have found faults that could have emitted psychoactive gases like ethylene. You are partaking in a tradition thousands of years old, a backroom, budget version of a sacred rite. You toss the henbane seeds onto the glowing coals. They sizzle and pop, releasing a thick, oily, acrid smoke. It doesn't smell like incense. It smells foul, like burning grease and something else, something deeply unpleasant. You lean forward, forcing yourself to inhale a lungful of the smoke. The effect is immediate and unpleasant. Your throat becomes dry and scratchy, your heart begins to beat a frantic, panicked rhythm against your ribs. You stare into the bowl of water, at the reflection of the ceiling above, warped and wavering. The smoke you exhale hangs in a thick cloud over the bowl, its reflection a ghostly serpent writhing in the dark water. You are now performing a specific kind of divination, capnomancy, the art of reading smoke. For a quirky, added layer of complexity, you remember a technique Alaric once described for finding lost objects, lecanomancy, divination by dropping oil into water and reading the shapes. You take a vial of olive oil and let a single drop fall into the center of the bowl. It spreads, creating a shimmering, iridescent lens that distorts the reflection of the smoke even further. You stare, forcing your mind to find patterns. At first, it's just a meaningless, swirling chaos. But as the alkaloids from the henbane smoke begin to seep into your brain, patterns begin to emerge. Or rather, your brain, now agitated and suggestible, begins to impose them. The smoke coils into the shape of a dark rope. Father Gregor. A tendril of smoke straightens, looking for a moment like a rope. A gallows. The reflection of the oil catches the candlelight, shining like a silver coin. Money. The visions are a crude collage of all your anxieties. The smoke seems to predict. Something bad will happen involving the people and things you are currently worried about. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Historians and cognitive scientists still argue whether the visions produced in such rituals were genuine, drug-induced hallucinations, or simply the product of a suggestible mind imposing patterns onto random stimuli, a phenomenon known as pareidolia, the same impulse that makes us see shapes in clouds. Are you truly seeing the future, or are you just staring at your own fear, amplified by a neurotoxin? A sudden, sharp image flashes in your mind, Alaric's face, pale and still. Your heart lurches. Is it a premonition, or just the henbane conjuring your deepest fear? The ambiguity is its own kind of torture. The smoke offers no clear answers, only more questions, more shadows. The future remains a locked room, and you have only succeeded in making yourself believe it's filled with monsters. Disgusted and more frightened than before, you douse the brazier. The spell is broken. The room is just a room again. The bowl is just a bowl of dirty water. You are left with a pounding headache, a racing heart, and the bitter taste of fear and burnt seeds in your mouth. You have sought knowledge in the smoke, but all you found was a distorted reflection of your own troubled soul. The failed attempt at divination leaves you with a profound sense of foolishness and a lingering, dry-mouthed paranoia. You see portents in every shadow. The future remains stubbornly opaque. You tried to lose yourself in the most mundane tasks the shop has to offer, finding a strange comfort in grinding spices, cinnamon from distant Ceylon, peppercorns from India, ginger from the lands even farther east. These are the smells of commerce, of wealth, of a world far beyond your little town and its petty fears. They are spices for cooking, for flavor, for medicine. They are safe. Or so you think. One afternoon, a ship's captain, a man whose face is a roadmap of foreign ports and cheap wine, comes into the shop. He is not sick. He is a merchant, a purveyor of rare goods. He has a small, heavily bound crate that he hefts onto the counter. From the Spice Islands, he says, his voice raspy. A new shipment. The finest you'll see this side of Venice. Alaric unlatches the crate. Inside, nestled in soft straw, are the most beautiful, exotic-smelling things you have ever seen, gnarled sticks of cinnamon, star-shaped anise, and a pouch of small, hard, wrinkled ovals. Alaric picks one up, holding it to his nose. "Nutmeg," he says, his voice filled with a reverence usually reserved for rare herbs. The nutmeg is fantastically expensive, almost as precious as saffron. A historical fact you know well is that the spice trade, particularly for goods like nutmeg, mace, and cloves, which came from a tiny handful of islands in Indonesia, was one of the most powerful economic drivers of the late Middle Ages and Renaissance. It fueled exploration, started wars, and made kingdoms rich. The spice in your hand is the 14th century equivalent of a microchip, a small, valuable object that travels the world and holds immense power. Alaric pays the captain a small fortune in silver, and the man leaves, happy. "This," Alaric says to you, holding up a single nutmeg nut, "is a medicine for flatulence, a flavoring for puddings, a preservative for meat, and a comfort for a troubled gut." He speaks of its conventional uses, the uses that make it so valuable to the wealthy ladies and lords of the region. But then he leans in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It is also," he says, "a key to very strange rooms. In a large enough dose, it is a poison that brings on visions." You stare at him, confused. This is a kitchen spice. You've had it in sweet cakes at the Midwinter Festival. "How large a dose?" you ask. "More than you would ever want to eat," he says with a grim chuckle. 2 whole nuts, grated and swallowed, can send a man on a journey that lasts for 2 days. A journey from which some do not return with their wits intact. He explains that the effects are nothing like the quick madness of henbane, or the serene peace of the poppy. The nutmeg trip is slow to start, sometimes taking 6 hours or more to begin. And it is a heavy, sluggish, debilitating experience, often accompanied by crippling nausea, a pounding heart, and a profound sense of impending doom. It is, by all accounts, a thoroughly unpleasant high. It's the psychoactive equivalent of food poisoning. This quirky and surprising fact about nutmeg is due to a compound called myristicin. While harmless in the tiny amounts used for seasoning, in large doses it acts as a powerful deliriant, similar in some ways to the alkaloids in belladonna, but with its own unique, and uniquely miserable, signature. It's a reminder that the line between culinary, medicinal, and psychoactive is entirely a matter of quantity. Historians and ethnobotanists still debate whether the psychoactive properties of nutmeg were widely known or if this was esoteric knowledge, a secret held by apothecaries and perhaps a few reckless experimenters. While some accounts, like those of the 12th century abbess Hildegard of Bingen, mention that nutmeg opens the heart, but can make the mind sluggish if overused, explicit references to its hallucinogenic power are rare in medieval European texts. Was it a secret deliberately kept quiet, or was the experience so unpleasant that it simply never caught on as a recreational drug? The fact that it was also incredibly expensive probably acted as a pretty effective deterrent. Alaric stores the precious nutmeg in a special locked box, separate from the herbs. Seeing it there, this seemingly innocent spice changes your perception of the world yet again. Until now, you had divided the world's substances into 2 categories: the mundane things you eat, and the potent things you use as medicine or poison. Now you see that this is a false division. The potential for an altered state, is not just hidden in the witch's garden or the shaman's forest. It is lurking right there in the kitchen pantry. What else, you wonder, is hiding in plain sight? Saffron, the most expensive spice of all. You know a large dose can cause fits of uncontrollable laughter, followed by stupor. Even the humble peppercorn, if taken in excess, can create a burning, feverish state. You realize that your entire world is saturated with psychoactive potential. The difference between food and drug, between seasoning and poison, is not in the substance itself, but in the knowledge of its use. Alaric has given you another lesson without meaning to. The fear of Father Gregor, the fear of the future, these are real. But the world is so much stranger and more complex than the priest's simple binary of good and evil, holy and profane. It's a world where a cure for gas is also a 2-day ticket to hell, and where the most valuable commodity in the world holds a secret, miserable madness. The first thing you are aware of is your own skull. It feels like a separate, hostile entity, A cage in which a blacksmith is enthusiastically trying to hammer out a dent from the inside. The second thing is your tongue, which you are fairly certain has been replaced overnight with a dried leather shoe. You crack open an eyelid. The gentle morning light filtering through the shop's grimy window is no longer a soft haze. It is a physical assault, a blade of white-hot steel stabbing directly into your brain. You groan, a sound that seems to come from someone else, and immediately regret it, as the vibration rattles every bone in your head. You don't remember falling asleep. You remember the nutmeg. You remember the strange, slow, heavy feeling spreading through your limbs, the feeling of sinking not into sleep, but into thick, warm mud. You remember the walls of the shop beginning to breathe. And then, fragments. Alaric's face, but his eyes were black pits. The sound of Father Gregor's voice, but it was coming from the floorboards. A terrifying, overwhelming certainty that your own hands were made of glass and about to shatter. It wasn't a journey. It was a hostage situation. So, a dry voice says from above you. The kitchen spice has taught you a lesson, has it? It's Alaric. He is standing over you, holding a cup. His expression is not one of sympathy. It is a finely balanced mixture of clinical interest and profound disappointment. You are a fool, boy, he says, not cruelly, but as a simple statement of fact. You went looking for secrets in a pudding spice. And now the spice is looking for a way out of you. You try to sit up, and a wave of nausea so profound it feels cosmic rolls over you. You fall back onto your thin pallet, groaning again. Your kingdom for a single, blessed aspirin. Or even just a clean bucket. Alaric diagnoses your condition through the lens of humoral theory, the bedrock of all his medical knowledge. Your foolishness has created a severe excess of black bile, he declares, and it has been scorched by the unnatural heat of the spice, creating a dust collar. It is a state of melancholy agitation, a dangerous imbalance. Your vital spirits are in disarray. He is not talking about a hangover. He is talking about a fundamental corruption of your body's essential elements. To treat this, he will not give you water and tell you to rest. He will treat the imbalance. He holds out the cup he is carrying. The liquid inside is a thick, dark, noxious-looking slurry. Drink this, he commands. What is it? You manage to croak. A purgative. Hellebore root and scammony, mixed with cenopods. It will cleanse the corrupt humors from your system. Vigorously. Because apparently, the best way to stop feeling like you've been poisoned is to drink a different, more aggressive poison. You drink it. The taste is indescribably foul, a symphony of bitterness that makes your entire body shudder in protest. You choke it down, and almost immediately, a new and terrible war begins in your gut. Historians and medical anthropologists still argue whether medieval people distinguished between mental illness, spiritual affliction, demonic influence, and the temporary after-effects of poisoning. To Father Gregor, your state would be a clear sign of demonic oppression, brought on by your dabbling in forbidden arts. To Alaric, it is a mechanical problem of the humors. To you, lying on the floor with your stomach churning, it feels like all of the above. You feel sick, cursed, and monumentally stupid. Here's a quirky and grim tidbit. While Alaric's purgative is a standard approach, folk traditions had other, stranger remedies for a bad trip, or mind poisoning. Some involved, shocking, the spirits out of the body, such as being repeatedly dunked in ice-cold water or being forced to stare at a spinning pattern wheel until you became dizzy and vomited. Others involved eating something symbolically, grounding, like bread filled with soil, to literally bring your soul back to earth. Alaric's method, while brutal, is at least based in some kind of medical logic. The hours that follow are a blur of misery. You are intimately reacquainted with the foul purgative several times as it makes its violent exit. You are left weak, hollowed out, and trembling. The psychological residue of the trip is even worse than the physical. The fear lingers. The fragmented visions replay in your mind, not as memories, but as echoes, imbued with a terrible sense of truth. Did you see the future? Or did you just see the scrambled contents of your own terrified subconscious? By evening, the worst of the physical storm has passed. You are left fragile, tremulous, and achingly empty. You have learned the hard way about the morning's grim reckoning. There is no gentle come-down, no comforting debrief. There is only the brutal, unforgiving mechanics of the body purging a poison, and a mind left scarred by a journey it was never meant to take. You went looking for wisdom, and all you got was this lousy metaphysical t-shirt and a desperate, lingering fear of the spice rack. The aftermath of the nutmeg is not a storm, but a quiet, gray drizzle in your soul. You feel scoured out, fragile. The physical sickness has passed, but it has left behind a profound weariness and a lingering fear. The experience was not enlightening, it was degrading. It felt cheap, dirty, and profoundly stupid. Your dalliance with the future in the henbane smoke was no better. You sought power and knowledge, and all you found was confusion and terror. You are sweeping the shop floor, the simple, repetitive motion of comfort. Your mind, however, is restless. You look at the shelves, at the neat rows of jars and boxes. What is all this? Where did this knowledge come from? Is it wisdom, or just a collection of dangerous recipes passed down by generations of fools like you? Your eyes land on a heavy, leather-bound book on Alaric's personal desk. It is his most prized possession. He handles it with a reverence that borders on the religious, which is ironic, given how he feels about Father Gregor. The leather is cracked and dark with age, the clasps a dull, tarnished brass. You have never been allowed to touch it. Alaric, seeing the direction of your gaze, lets out a long sigh. Perhaps he senses your existential crisis. Perhaps he's just tired of seeing you mope around the shop like a ghost with a stomach ache. Come here, he says, his voice surprisingly gentle. He beckons you to the desk and, for the first time, opens the book in front of you. The pages are not paper, but vellum, thin, treated animal skin. They are covered in a cramped, faded brown script, the Latin dense and full of unfamiliar abbreviations. In the margins there are delicate, hand-drawn illustrations of plants. It smells of dust, time, and knowledge. This is what separates us from old Elspeth with her flying ointment, Alaric says softly. This is the foundation. The rest is just commentary. He points to a name at the top of a page, Galenus. Galen of Pergamon. A Greek physician who lived in the Roman Empire more than 1,000 years ago. This is the source. The wellspring. You are looking at a handwritten copy of a copy of a copy of ancient wisdom. It is a mainstream historical fact that Galen's medical theories, especially his version of humorism, formed the undisputed basis of all Western medicine for over 1,300 years. To question Galen was to question reality itself. He did not guess, Alaric explains, tapping a passage. He observed. He dissected. He classified. He created a system. He taught that herbs have properties, hot, cold, wet, dry, and that these must be used to balance the humors of the body. He gave us a grammar for our craft. He turned it from witchcraft into a science. You listen, captivated. This is the logic, the reason, that you have been craving. This is the antidote to the screaming mandrakes and the whispering smoke. This is order in a world of chaos. But then, a doubt creeps in. If Galen knew it all, you ask, then where in his system is the heart of a turtle dove for a love potion? Where is the ritual of the black dog for harvesting the mandrake? You think of Elspeth and her flying ointment, the stable hand and his filter. Where does he write that nutmeg will make you believe your hands are made of glass? Alaric closes the great book. He doesn't, he says simply. Galen gives us the pillars of the temple. But the gargoyles on the roof, the saints in the niches, the moss on the stones, those are local. They grow here. He begins to pace the small space of the shop. The knowledge in that book was saved by men like Brother Thomas at the Abbey, copied in scriptoriums while the world burned outside their walls. But much was lost. And in the vacuum, another kind of knowledge survived. The knowledge of the village. The wisdom of the midwife. The experiments of the hedge witch. Historians still argue whether the practical medicine of the Middle Ages was a degraded, fragmented remnant of classical knowledge, or a vibrant and syncretic system that successfully blended Roman theory with effective local folk remedies. Was it a dying echo of a golden age, or a living, breathing hybrid, constantly evolving? Take St. John's wort, Alaric says, pointing to the bundle Father Gregor had so sanctimoniously identified. Galen knew it as a balm for wounds. But the folk here know that on the day of St. John's beheading, its juice runs red, like blood. They know it drives away the demons of melancholy. Is that a Christian miracle? A pagan memory? Or just a close observation of the plant's chemistry dressed up in a story? This belief that the plant's red sap represents the saint's blood is a perfect quirky tidbit of Christianized folklore, a local story layered on top of an ancient remedy. It's a great party trick, probably, but not something you'd find in a Roman text. So, what are we? You asked, the question at the heart of your crisis. Are we men of science, like Galen? Or storytellers, like the old women by the fire? Alaric stops pacing and looks at you, his eyes tired but clear. A good apothecary, he says, is both. He has Galen in his head and the village in his hands. He knows the system, the theory, the balance of humors. But he also knows that fear can be cured by a useless but impressive charm, that a turtledove's heart gives a love-sick boy the courage he actually needs, and that the story of the screaming mandrake keeps fools from poisoning themselves. He allows himself a small, grim smile. He knows what is real, what is useful, and what is profitable. And he rarely confuses the three. You understand. Your craft is not a pure science. It is a messy, beautiful, dangerous chimera, a thing with the head of a Roman philosopher, the body of a village herbalist, and the tail of a market charlatan. It is a living thing, built from lost lore and lingering fear. And it is your job to master the whole strange beast. A quiet year turns. The seasons cycle through their familiar alchemy, from the green fire of spring to the rust and gold of autumn. The fear that once stalked you has receded, replaced by a kind of weary acceptance. You have looked into the smoke and found nothing. You have tasted the deceit of the nutmeg and learned its hollow lesson. You have seen the foundation of your craft in Galen's ancient words and felt the chaotic reality of it in the pinch of a powder. You are no longer just an apprentice. You are a student of the strange, tangled garden of human belief. One late afternoon, as the sun casts long, golden shadows across the shop floor, a young mother comes in. She is frantic. Her baby is sick with a fever, her skin hot to the touch, her cries thin and weak. The child is wrapped tightly in a woolen blanket, its small face flushed and miserable. The mother's eyes are wide with the purest fear you have ever seen. You watch Alaric. You expect him to reach for the classic remedies, a tincture of willow bark, perhaps, or a cooling compress of mint. Instead, he does something that surprises you. He asks the woman a series of questions that have nothing to do with humors or fevers. Has the neighbor looked upon the child with envy? He asks gently. Have you recently passed a place known to be haunted by spirits? Did you hear the cry of a screech owl last night? The young mother, through her tears, latches onto the first question. Yes, she sobs. Old man Hemlock's wife, she is barren. She looked at my sweet boy with a sour face. She has put the evil eye on him. She has found her answer. It is not a sickness. It is a curse. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle you had been missing. Historians of medicine and folklore emphasize that for many people in the medieval world, the why of a sickness was far more important than the how. Identifying a pathogen was impossible. Identifying a malevolent neighbor was easy. The diagnosis wasn't biological. It was social and spiritual. Alaric nods gravely, as if confirming a complex medical diagnosis. The evil eye is a powerful malice, he says, but we have remedies for it. He does not reach for the belladonna or the poppy. He takes a small piece of red string and ties it carefully around the baby's wrist. The color red turns away envy, he explains to the mother. Then, he gives her a small, smooth, black stone, a piece of jet. This will absorb the lingering poison of the curse. Keep it in his cradle. Finally, he sells her a tiny, ridiculously expensive packet of incense, frankincense and myrrh. Burn this in your home at sunset and sunrise, he instructs. Its holy smoke will purify the air and drive out the lingering spirit of the curse. The woman pays him, her hands trembling with gratitude. She clutches the stone, checks the red string, and leaves the shop with a look of profound relief on her face. Her fear is gone. She has a diagnosis she understands, and she has a set of tools to fight it. You stare at Alaric, bewildered. The stone? The string? The incense? You ask. That's not medicine. That's theater. The willow bark I added to the incense will bring down the fever, Alaric says quietly, without looking at you. The frankincense will help clear the child's breathing. The rest, he admits, was for the mother. Her fear was making her frantic. A frantic mother cannot care for a sick child. I treated her fear, which was the greater sickness. Now she is calm. Now she will care for the boy properly. Now he has a better chance of surviving the night. And there it is. The final lesson. You look around the shop, at this strange and wonderful and terrifying place. It is not just a pharmacy. It is a theater. It is a church. It is a laboratory. And it is a battleground for the human soul. You realize that every substance on these shelves, from the humblest chamomile to the most terrifying nightshade, is a key. But the locks they open are not just in the body. They are in the mind. The quest for a high, you finally understand, is not just about visions or escape. It is about a deeper human need, the need for a narrative. The need for an explanation. The need for a sense of control in a world that is chaotic and cruel. Elspeth wants a story where she can fly. The stable hand wants a story where he can find love. The monk wants a story where he can touch God. The mother of the sick child wants a story where a black stone can defeat a curse. Your job, as an apothecary, is to be the keeper of those stories. You must know the chemistry of the plants, but you must also know the chemistry of belief. You must understand that a placebo is not a failure. It is one of the most powerful medicines you possess. You must know when to administer a drug and when to administer a ritual. You look at the garden of herbs and poisons that surrounds you, the legacy of 1,000 years of experiment and fear. It is a garden that holds the power to heal, to madden, to kill, to inspire, and to deceive. It can fuel a berserker's rage, a shaman's vision, a witch's flight, and a lover's hope. The plants themselves do not change. Only the stories we tell about them do. You are not just an apothecary's apprentice anymore. You are a gardener, tending to the strange and dangerous landscape of human consciousness itself. And as the last light of the day fades, you take the broom and begin to sweep, the simple, rhythmic motion a quiet prayer in the heart of the world's most complicated pharmacy. You have found your place. And so, our journey through the medieval apothecary's shop comes to a close. We leave our apprentice there, at the threshold of a lifetime of learning, forever balancing the science of the body with the deep, strange magic of the mind. The dust motes continue to dance in the fading light, each one a tiny world of scent and potential, a reminder that the quest to alter our own consciousness, to soothe our fears and explore the hidden corridors of the soul, is one of the oldest and most enduring stories of all. The herbs still grow, the knowledge still whispers, and the eternal human yearning for something more than the waking world provides continues, a quiet, insistent hum beneath the noise of history. Now, as the shadows in your own room grow longer and softer, let the echoes of that distant world fade away. Let the scent of dried herbs and ancient vellum drift into the quiet corners of your mind. There is no need to fear the pinch of the powder or the whisper in the smoke. Here you are safe. Here you can rest. Allow the gentle weight of sleep to settle over you, a comforting blanket, a peaceful tide pulling you out into a calm and dreamless sea.